presenter is Catherine Bernard. You have the floor.
You want to stand over here?
Well, I can probably stay right here. At first I thought, oh boy, I get to talk after everyone else, and then I thought, oh, I have to talk after 3 other lawyers. So thank you all so much for being here and for paying attention. I'm Catherine Bernard. I live over in Ashford Park on the other side of Dresden from here. And I'm from Virginia originally. I came down here to go to Emory for undergraduate, studied political science and philosophy, got very involved in the Atlanta community, was a volunteer for Literacy Volunteers of America and Drew Charter School. So I really just began enjoying the community right away, and though I did go back up to Virginia for law school at the University of Virginia, I came back down here right away to practice at Rogers & Harding, a litigation firm downtown, because I love Georgia. Ended up marrying a Georgia Tech guy, so here I am in Brookhaven. Though my path to Brookhaven did take me through another part of the state first. After law school, I lived in Fulton County in Midtown. Great place, really enjoyed the walkability, the sustainability of that area. But I found myself living life as a big firm associate and really feeling like it wasn't what a lawyer was supposed to be doing. I never actually talked to people. I didn't spend much time in the courtroom actually seeing the way that laws were interpreted and what was going on in the practice of law. So I applied to the Central Public Defender System for the state of Georgia and ended up getting sent down to Dublin, which for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of going, it is halfway between Atlanta and Savannah. You have probably stopped at the McDonald's at some point on a trip. And so I spent 4 years down there as a full-time public defender for the Dublin Judicial Circuit. And honestly, my entire perspective really on not just politics, but on life changed after that experience. I had grown up in a liberal college town in Virginia, Blacksburg, Virginia Tech, wonderful place. I still have to say Georgia Tech, even though I know people down here just say Tech. But it was a place where government was a very positive influence on people's lives. We had a wonderful land-grant university, a happy population, that didn't require a lot of heavy government intervention into people's lives, and what intervention there was a positive experience. But when I became a public defender, my perspective changed because I saw things that I had been told were just propaganda, that you would never see people making bad decisions based on incentives from government programs. And, as they say, when the facts change, you've got to change your opinion to suit those facts rather than trying to revisit reality and massage it into something different, as lawyers are sometimes tempted to do. And so I ended up getting active in politics in the Republican Party starting in 2009, which most of my friends back in Virginia have forgiven me by this point for being a Republican. And I've really enjoyed it, being a limited government conservative. Really, I do try to share with folks what a humanitarian perspective that is. And that's what being a public defender really taught me, was that these well-intentioned government programs can often have disastrous impacts on the very people that they're supposed to help. And as I observed this, I became more active in politics. I ended up going to the 2012 National Convention in Tampa as a delegate for the Republican Party, and wow, that was a great way to get started in the Georgia Republican Party. My first day down there, standing up in front of the chair of the RNC and our governor and Secretary of State and everyone else who was in the Georgia Republican Party, was a great way to get involved and to sort of demystify the process. I got to know all these players on the state stage very early on in my involvement in politics, and that's helped me build a lot of relationships that have allowed me to really grow a lot as I've moved through the state and participated in various political programs and activities. So I was a full-time public defender for 4 years down there. I did get married, and my husband bought us a beautiful home in Brookhaven in 2011, and so I was very excited to come back up here. I still do work with the public defender system as a conflict defender. So I take cases throughout the state, concentrated mostly in middle Georgia, and that's given me a really interesting perspective on what's going on in courtrooms around the state. I have a lot of friends who spend a lot of time practicing in Fulton and DeKalb, and of course the reason why the seat is open, as we did have our previous state rep being promoted, and it has shown me how it can be difficult for lawyers who practice in Fulton and DeKalb to really have the political independence that they need to participate in the political process effectively. There can be a lot of conflicts of interest between your work and your political efforts, and I'm really fortunate to be able to avoid that through my work with the state. I've also been pretty involved in politics since coming back up to Brookhaven. I actually did run against Mike Jacobs in the primary, and he is a very nice guy. We have a lot of friends in common from UGA, but there were a couple of issues that I disagreed with him on, and even though a lot of people told me, you know, oh, you're new, it'll be so much better for your political career if you wait a little while. I thought, you know, if I'm sitting here saying that I disagree with the decision that my representative is making, but yet when he's up for a primary, I'm just sitting on my hands because of my future political career, you know, what does that say about me and my priorities? So I threw my name in the hat. I ran a clean campaign, just talked about the issues and the policies. I did lose, which is why we're all sitting here today. But it did introduce me to a lot of different folks throughout the area who were very, very concerned about economic development, about transportation, about taxes. And that was a huge advantage when the redevelopment powers law came down the pike in fall of 2014. That actually started all the way back in February of 2014 when our city council voted to ask our legislative delegation to put it on the agenda for the legislature. And then it came back to the city council and mayor for approval to be put on the ballot. And most people didn't know about it. There wasn't any kind of public campaign to let people know that the redevelopment powers law, something that would fundamentally change the character of the Brookhaven charter, was being put on the ballot less than 2 years after we became a city, again with no publicity. So I like to read laws. I'm trained in studying legislation, and I read the law and was extremely troubled by what I found. There's one line in particular that created a class of debt that was completely exempt from the Georgia Constitution's restrictions on debt. The Georgia Constitution requires that before a city or a county can take on debt, there needs to be a vote of the entire populace, which makes sense, right? You know, we elect our city council and our mayor, and they have fixed terms, but a debt, you know, that's something that will last forever, and we'll all be responsible for. Our children and grandchildren will be responsible for it. So it makes sense to have that restriction in the Constitution that before you take on hundreds of millions in debt, you need to talk to everybody who's going to be responsible for paying it. Well, unfortunately, the redevelopment powers law would have wiped that out. It would have created this tax allocation district. I'm sorry.
I have to be fair to each of you. With that, what is the most pressing issue District 80 faces, and how will you solve it? If it's redevelopment powers, you can continue.
I think redevelopment powers is kind of emblematic of what one of the greatest problems that we'll be facing is. You know, I agree with the folks up here, education, transportation, taxation, especially the relationship between counties and cities. These are all crucially important, no doubt. But what we have to look at is the procedure by which we're going to be able to find solutions. And that's where the ethics and transparency of Georgia government come into play. So I have spent a lot of time up at the Gold Dome. You know, just because I lost an election last spring wasn't going to, you know, I wasn't going to sit on my hands again. I was going to go up and let the committees know if there were problematic bills. And what I saw was a process that has become extremely difficult for individual citizens to keep track of. You know, we have busy lives here in House District 80. You knock on doors and you meet people who just are doing exceptional things, you know, in their communities, in politics, at the local, at the state level. But these are people who don't have time to go and track down their state representative, track down their elected officials to say, oh, can you please tell me if there's anything, you know, coming down the pike that I need to be worried about? They just don't have time for that. So I think when you combine that with the ethics and transparency problems that we face in Georgia government, which Lauren ably mentioned that we did receive a pretty unfortunate ranking on that scale, when you combine that, you've got a dangerous situation for citizens. And that's what the redevelopment powers law showed. We almost had a permanent law in place that would have allowed our city council to vote hundreds of millions of dollars into us onto us with no approval from the citizens whatsoever. That almost slipped by us, and it was only because a couple of us were crazy enough to go and read the bill and spend a bunch of our own money trying to run a campaign against it that we were able to prevent that from happening. And I am happy to say, of course, Brookhaven rejected that 60 to 40%. So that's, I think, the biggest problem, is that we're busy people, we care about a lot of things, we want good things to happen, but it's that process of translating those desires of wanting good things to happen into actual action at the Gold Dome, and then once we get that action, making sure that government does what it says. That's the biggest issue facing House District 80.
Great answer. Does anybody else have any follow-on questions?
I have a question. That is very, very important that we be able to understand what we're voting on. I get flyers a lot, and I look at them, and they all look great. Of course, they're going to tell me what they want me to know. Now, what I like about you is you tell people what they need to know. And my
This doesn't
question,
sound like I was about to say that sounds a little biased for a question.
what I would like to know is how will you keep us informed once, if elected, as to what all these things mean, so that we really know not just what they want us to know, but how this is going to affect me. It may not affect everybody the same way, but we need to know that. How will you communicate that to us?
I think you've got to have the regular town halls. You've got to have opportunities for people to get engaged that are very easy. But you've also got to take it online, because a lot of people don't have time to attend a town hall. You're going to have to do mailers. People are just facing such a glut of information these days that it's so easy for something very important to slip by. So it's absolutely crucial that you take on all of these different avenues. And as the state rep, I would be responsible for making sure that all of those would be fulfilled. The regular mail, the social media, the town halls, as well as a survey system so that people can make their views heard, in a very easy way. Because the state representative's role isn't to make decisions for the people of House District 80, isn't to say, oh, look what I just did for you, aren't you so excited about it? It's to tell people what's coming down the pike, make it available for public discussion so that we have time to come to the best consensus. And again, that's going to require a lot of different avenues, town halls, surveys, mail, and all the rest.